Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this clown decade, the decade where things are going to get worse before they get better. And today we are going to be going through a hypothesis that is so wrong, I simply could not avoid making this what I imagine will be short video. This is Vicki Spratt, an English housing journalist and documentary maker, though she's obviously made documentaries and segments for TV and radio on other things such as side effects of hormonal contraception, abortion rights in Northern Ireland, but she is best known for campaigning Making Rent Fair, in which she actually succeeded in getting letting fees for tenants in England banned, which, to be fair, doesn't seem particularly unreasonable. However, at the moment, she seems to be advocating for actually making rents much worse. So let's get right into it. Let's hear what she had to say about house building on the newsagents.
Labour will still have the Affordable Homes Programme funding and they will have private investment. If they could bring those two together, I think this is absolutely doable.
So keeping the ridiculous amount of demand-side subsidies plus more private investment, which is not really going into detail on that yet, will mean that, yes, rents will come down, according to Vicki Spratt. I just feel like I need to translate because this is the clip that the newsagents decided to cut from, and it's not really giving us much context.
But obviously we have to wait and see whether they can do that. But there's something else that I would say here that is not being talked about today, and I really wish it was. How many homes in this 1.5 million figure in these new towns are going to be truly affordable social homes? Because those new towns you just mentioned, John, that big house building drive we had in the post-war years that got us up to that 300,000 a year figure, by the way, at points, most of the homes being delivered were council homes.
I mean, once again, it needs to be pointed out that she's already acknowledged that there is demand-side subsidy. Why do you need even more demand-side subsidy? Council homes, where the council subsidise the cost for renting, when you already have all of these demand-side subsidies. Which, by the way, an awful lot of these demand-side subsidies, they're part of the reason that house prices are going up. Houses still follow the laws of supply and demand. Now, there's some unique properties of the housing market that don't make them as affected by the supply-demand curve, but they are still affected largely by the supply-demand curve.
So to do this, it's not just about homes, it's about who's going to live in them. And we are at a really difficult moment for our economy and our housing market, where house prices remain at historic highs. Interest rates have doubled in the last 3 years. So if you build new homes for private sale, I'm not sure how many first-time buyers or even people like me who might want to move from a one-bed flat to a 2 or 3 bedroom house will actually be able to afford to buy them.
So the implication here is that building new homes, specifically 1.5 million new homes to the housing stock, won't really affect house prices, which is obviously nonsense. I can't tell you how ridiculous it is for people to say, oh, more houses in the housing stock won't bring down prices. Of course they will. Now, of course, there are other factors affecting the housing market, such as interest rates, as she mentioned, along with all the demand-side subsidies, which are all going to be keeping the prices high, because if financing is cheap, which it still is despite the rise in interest rates, then it's going to be easier to borrow the money to actually buy a house, increasing demand. However, there's also things affecting supply side. 1.5 million new homes will obviously increase the supply. Another thing is that there's not really such thing as a second-hand housing market. These new builds will be in the exact same economic space as the old houses that people are moving from. It's not like cars where as soon as you buy a car and it leaves a dealer, it loses 20% of its value, and therefore it's on a completely different second-hand market. So there are things also affecting the supply side, and so overall there is not enough happening on the demand side to mean that an increase in supply will not affect the housing market. I mean, I'll go into details of research on this later, but this is very silly from Ms. Spratt.
But presumably the thinking is that if you have built 1.5 million new homes, there is much more supply, and according to laws of supply and demand, that if you do your basic A-level economics, is that prices will come down.
It's so annoying when people say, oh, this A-level economics, as if As if fundamentals of these subjects do not matter. Now, there are definitely things at school that you learn that aren't true. A big one in the geological space that obviously I occupied for quite a few years is that in GCSE geography you will learn that the mantle of the Earth is liquid. This isn't true, it's completely solid. We know this via the nature of seismic waves that pass through the mantle. Clearly it's not liquid because you don't get shadow zones from certain seismic waves that can't travel through liquid. We can tell they go through the mantle. Anyway, geology lesson aside, yes, there are some things you learn at school that aren't true. Supply and demand at A level, that's one of those things that's very fundamental to economics that actually is true, and an awful lot of economic theory is built upon it. But Vicky was kind of nodding her head of, yeah, it's very silly that we're going back to A-level economics, isn't it? Don't you know that I went to Oxford? She went to Oxford to do English language, but that's by the by.
Well, you're going to get me cancelled, because every time I talk about this issue, it really, really whips up such a debate.
Yeah, it's probably because you're fundamentally wrong on the issue. Don't get me wrong, there are absolutely subjects where just kicking up a debate, you are doing so because you are right and fighting against orthodoxy. But fighting against increasing supply brings down prices has got to be one of the stupidest things that I ever see when it comes to the housing debate.
You would think that that is how supply and demand would work with housing, but look at Help to Buy. When David Cameron's government brought in Help to Buy, and they did get some new homes onto the market and they were available to first-time buyers, house prices did not come down.
Yeah, I can see why this causes such a debate. I don't think it causes so much of a debate, more of a, wow, you really are stupid, aren't you? Because if we're talking about an increase in supply in the housing market, I don't know why you would then bring up a demand-side subsidy, which I have brought up for half this video to say demand-side subsidies increase house prices. So I'm not surprised that along with a demand-side subsidy, there was an increase in the supply stock. Yeah, I'm not surprised that house prices didn't come down. In fact, I suspect they went up, as they have been doing regularly for the past few decades. Again, I'm not even mentioning immigration here, by the way. Yes, I know mass immigration is going to massively increase demand. Don't worry. However, this is the issue. We've had all of these demand-side subsidies and the massive extra immigration, and we were 30 years behind house building anyway when it came to native Brits. That yeah, of course we need to start house building. Of course this 1.5 million extra homes is what Labour are going to do, because of course that's going to be the perfect way to bring house prices down. And yes, I do think it's a good idea. I think it's really stupid to say, no, I don't want extra houses built because some foreigners might buy them. It also brings the house prices down for the native Brits that we all care so much about. I'd rather everyone find it easier to buy a house rather than spite them because you don't want foreigners buying up new housing stock.
I do not think housing works like other assets.
Yeah, that's true, but I went through it all. There are things that exacerbate the supply curve, and there are things that exacerbate the demand curve. However, the fundamental more supply means lower prices does absolutely apply. Again, I will go into details in that after we've gone through Vicky's arguments.
And I was speaking to a brilliant economist the other week, Dame Kate Barker. She authored the seminal housing review when Tony Blair was Prime Minister. And I asked her about this. I said, do you think if Labour build 1.5 million new homes, that homes will be cheaper? And she said, I don't think that's how it's going to work.
Economic advisor while Tony Blair was in charge. Do we all need reminding of what happened just after Tony Blair resigned from office? There was quite the large economic screw-up that an awful lot of the world still hasn't quite recovered from.
If you think about the iPhone, when Apple started suddenly making more iPhones, which is a luxury product, iPhones didn't get cheaper.
No, but as you say, that's one, a luxury product, two, it's a branded item that an awful lot of people are happy to pay thousands of pounds to own, and also there was no second-hand market for iPhones because they kept making them obsolete. This comparison simply doesn't work. As I mentioned before, there's no such thing as a second-hand home, because all homes go into the same stock, whether they're a new build or one built in the 50s. Hell, homes built in the Victorian era are still around and are still on the housing market because they keep just getting renovated. I mean, what an absolutely ludicrous comparison. I can't believe you brought up iPhones in comparison to the housing market. There's so much difference.
So I don't know if house prices will fall. They might not rise dramatically, but I think we have to be very careful about this idea that flooding the market with new supply will mean that the value of homes suddenly drops.
Okay, I don't think anyone's argument is that 1.5 million new homes, all of a sudden all homes cost 100 quid. There is no doubt in my mind that at the very least this increase in supply will decrease the rates that the house prices are going up. It may even see a drop in them. However, if Labour are still allowing millions of immigrants to come into the country, that'll exacerbate demand. If they increase the subsidy to help to buy and things like that, that'll increase demand. If they don't do anything about cheap finance, that'll increase demand. But just because it won't necessarily make house prices come down doesn't mean that they are not worthy of being built. More homes is obviously a good thing for Britain. Yes, even if we had no immigrants whatsoever, we are still behind on house building.
It might. I could be wrong. Dame Kate Barker could be wrong.
I'm going to throw it out here, but I think an economic advisor to Tony Blair and someone who did English at Oxford probably are wrong about the economy. I'm just going to throw that out there.
But I think that's actually going to be one of the biggest issues that Labour face, because what we know about housing is that it doesn't seem to function in the way that the other products or assets do.
Yes, different products are affected by the supply and demand curve in different ways. Housing is certainly unique in that there's a lag between supply going up and house prices being affected by it. Because of the length of time between building a home and someone actually buying it, it takes some time. Plus everything else I've mentioned. I mean, obviously this caused a massive harumph on Twitter, people saying you are economically illiterate if you think that there is anything that is not affected by the supply and demand curve. And there's absolutely no reason that adding more houses to the housing supply will not cause the house prices to either drop or at least not increase at the exacerbated rates that they are at the moment. So because of this, Vicky made a small Twitter thread trying to clarify her position. Increasing the supply of new homes will not necessarily make homes more affordable. That is not to say that we don't need to build. We do. Then why even bring it up? But this shouldn't be a contentious thing to point out. Several variables make the relationship between new housing and affordability complex. New supply usually creates a net increase in the number of vacant properties in any given area, which will bring down house prices. Prices. This can put downward pressure on prices, which stops them from rising. Hooray! She gets it. But that doesn't necessarily mean prices will fall significantly below their current high level. Nobody's making that argument. When people say house prices will come down, they don't necessarily mean that the wholesale price of houses will come down. They are certainly saying that they'll make them more affordable by stopping the 1,000% increase or whatever it is in housing prices since like the 90s. Instead it'll bring it down to, maybe a 2% rise every year, and hopefully you'll see wages start rising by like 10% if we can get the economy in order, and at that point house prices are pretty much just coming down in real terms. That is what people mean. She goes on to say the research has shown in cases where supply of new homes comes with significant improvement in amenities, it could attract enough new demand to put upward pressure on prices in local area. What increasing the supply of new homes does definitely is free up the housing market and make it easier for people who can afford to move to do so. Wow. So it does make housing more affordable. She has literally just admitted it. For someone who did English at Oxford, you have an awfully bad time at actually understanding what other people are saying. You have basically just repeated what they're saying while saying they're wrong. In those new homes are affordable for wealthier private renters, it may also mean that there is a bit less competition in the private rented sector, which could see rent drop. So she's clarifying her position, saying, yes, those people that called me an idiot are right. Multiple things can be true at once. We need new housing. New supply in some places may reduce demand and stabilise prices, but it could also create new demand and drive up prices. This has long been true, which is why post-war governments built social housing. Yeah, and then Thatcher sold them off, and no one built anything else for 30 years. Mainly because of planning laws, by the way. Labour's intention to build new homes is good and necessary, but it is wrong to say that new supply automatically equals more affordable homes for private sale. It does not. I mean, even if it doesn't affect house prices whatsoever, if you are building new homes, that is adding to the GDP anyway, and these people are line go up type people. I mean, she is saying it's good and necessary, but one, is obviously going to bring house prices down in terms of either not raise them as much as they would with all the demand subsidy, the increase in immigration, etc., etc., etc. But to think that when people say, oh, this will bring house prices down, they mean the wholesale price is going to come down, that's just completely misunderstanding the issue. And for someone who has been talking about housing affordability for 10 years, you should know that that is the argument. You should know that is the argument. And if you don't, I don't know what the hell you have been writing about for 10 years. What has basically happened here is that Vicki Spratt has been overly pedantic and then made herself look a bit of an idiot out of that pedantry. And anyway, she's listened to one particular expert who, as I say, appeared to advise a government into a financial crash. I don't know why then she doesn't actually look at studies into building more houses and how it affects house prices, because again, they say the opposite of what she said. So from GLA Housing and Land, the affordability impacts of new housing supply, a summary of recent research published in August 2023, if we have a quick look at the executive summary, the research finds in general building new market rate homes makes other housing more affordable. It does so by creating chains of vacancies and moves that can reach across an entire housing market area. These moving chains improve the availability and affordability of housing throughout the range of prices and rents, including for low-income households. Building market rate housing therefore indirectly increases the availability of homes, affordable to low-income households, although not as directly as building social housing and other kinds of affordable housing. Obviously, the geographical distribution of market rate housing supply matters. If it is focused only in low-income areas, it can lead to localised increase in prices and rents in those areas while still improving affordability elsewhere. If the impact on demand resulting from improvements in local amenities and services outweighs the impact on supply. In other words, yes, increasing the housing stock improves affordability. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that the house prices directly come down, though in some cases obviously they will. It means that the house price increases are dramatically reduced and either bring it below inflation or bring it below wage increases, which in real terms basically means, yes, the house prices are coming down. And that was research that was done a year ago. So obviously increasing the housing supply helps, but this isn't the only research done on this, obviously. But before we move on to that, I suppose I should be absolutely fair on Vicky here and point out that there is a broad consensus in the academic and policy literature that increases in the supply of new homes bears down on house prices and rents over the long term in and at city or national level, but considerable uncertainty over the short term and local effects. Some of this controversy is due to lack of good evidence, given the difficulty of separating out cause and effect, when new construction can seem to coincide with rising prices, and when a host of other factors can affect price and rents. For example, there are concerns that adding high-priced new homes into an area drives up costs for those nearby, or at least does little to improve the prospects of lower-income households. Now, as far as I'm aware, Labour are not adding high-priced new homes in low-income areas. They are building new towns, which generally don't have a local area outside, I guess, of neighbouring towns. Naturally, I think they are going to be adding amenities there too. And if they're adding 1.5 million new homes, I think it's pretty clear that the supply is outweighing the amenities that they are adding. In other words, this is obviously going to bring house prices down. This is one of the few things that Labour are doing that I don't have much issue with. Yet, because it's not directly social housing, an awful lot of people like Vicki Spratt are saying, oh, well, we absolutely need these to be social housing because otherwise it's not going to be affordable. That is nonsense. And anyway, Rachel Reeves has clearly pointed out that there is not as much money as she was hoping for, and at the same time, she's spending $7 billion on investing in the National Wealth Fund, which is putting money into, quite frankly, industries that are not going to make money, but details on that for another video. Anyway, I may as well labour the point to death and point out that from communities and local government, in a final report from 2010, the impacts of restricting housing supply on house price and affordability, they had these key points. House prices react more strongly to changes in demand in supply, constrained places. As a consequence, controlling for demand conditions, house prices are significantly higher in more supply constrained cases. In other words, obviously not constraining the supply is going to bring down the prices, whether that's directly or relative to what they would raise by if you kept constraining the supply. Regulatory constraints imposed by the British planning system, oh god yes, we need to burn it all down, can to a large extent explain the high house prices in much of southern England. In most places, planning constraints have a larger impact on house prices than physical supply constraints. And finally, the extraordinarily high house prices in the Greater London area can to a large extent be explained by a combination of physical supply constraints due to local scarcity of undeveloped developable land and planning relation constraints. Outside of the Greater London area, scarcity of undeveloped developable land has no meaningful impact on house prices. So to make it clear, this report is mainly on the Greater London area and its surrounding areas, and it's making clear that in 2010 at the very least, London was suffering from ridiculously high house prices because, due to greenbelt constraints and other planning constraints, nothing new could be built on developable land. However, outside of London, this is not having as much of an effect. However, due to this planning constraint, people started moving outside of the Greater London area, outside of those greenbelts, and this is now where, according to people I know that live there, there is an awful lot of developing being done in those areas. And it's no surprise because it's the only place where they can actually do it. If you didn't have this constraint on where you can actually build these new houses, then you probably wouldn't be seeing, as they like to put it all the time, yes, I'm talking about you, Jack, these old medieval villages that are being concreted over. Though even that wording of the issue I have issues with, however, we're not getting into that now. The point that I am absolutely beating to death here is that increasing the housing supply where we need the housing supply to increase, i.e. where people want to live, is obviously going to bring down house prices, either relatively or in real terms, or even the wholesale price is going to drop. However, Vicky did her absolute best to pretend not to know what more affordable homes meant. And this was basically an excuse for me to make a video about why YIMBYism is actually great. Because quite clearly nobody still is going to be making social housing, because pretty much every council is broke, and Britain, and the Labour government especially, would rather spend the money on making green ports and investing in electric vehicle gigafactories and investing in carbon capture storage, which is supposed to make money somehow. Again, I'll save that for another video. Than in building houses which they are giving to the private sector, because the private sector for literally decades has been screaming for less constraint in the planning system. Anyway, that is my short Wednesday morning rant over, and I hope you enjoyed the video. For a quick shilling, obviously regional variations tonight on Tale Features channel, and on Friday I will be on with my girlfriend and other guests, as my girlfriend wants to do a small charity stream to help out an independent hedgehog rescuer on TikTok. So please join us. Not sure what channel it's going to be on, but I'll make a community post on YouTube, and it will be absolutely everywhere on the Discords, links down below. So you know where to find us and how you can help us saving the hedgehogs while we read funny animal stories like last time. Right, that's everything I had for you today, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.